Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a wonderful day ahead of you. The weekend nears, and so does FPL. So in today's edition of Solving Your Problems, the penultimate one for the season, I have for you a look at my captaincy change, a look at the confirmation of my transfer, some differential, well, a differential for this week, and an eye on 38, benching dilemmas, what we should do with the forwards, yet again in some more depth, and one other subject as well. As time is of the essence, I should probably get into it. But if that sounds good, then do drop a like on the video. And equally, if you have not subscribed already, then that would be absolutely magnificent, especially if you've been watching the channel for quite a while or gained any benefit from it. Just take you 1 second, go and click. Now, without anything else needing to be said, let's hop into it. Firstly, we will start with my captaincy change. In yesterday's team selection video, I expressed how I thought Bryan Mbeumo was the best option in terms of expected points, but was going for Palmer more so due to strategic reasons. However, with the disparity between their expected points in terms of my projections, I just haven't been able to justify to myself going for Cole Palmer, and hence I'll be going for Bryan Mbeumo. As I said yesterday, I think he's got pretty much everything going for him. In terms of Anthony Robinson, I think it'll be touch and go. I did try and look before I filmed this at Marco Silva's press conference. It seemed that there wasn't much on him at all. So even if he does play, I still think that he is going to be my captain. I still think he can do well, but I would prefer for him to have that matchup against Sessegnon. In terms of Palmer, like I said yesterday, I'm not sure how he interacts with the United system and what role he plays exactly. I'm not sure how Chelsea fare without like a traditional number 9. I'm not sure who exactly plays 9. I assume it will be Neto. I prefer for it to be George, even though he hasn't had too many minutes there and is a little bit inexperienced. I'd still prefer that, but I don't think that I don't think Maresca's going to go for that. I don't think he necessarily. I'm not sure how often he finds himself in front of that defensive line between the lines. How many times he does within the game, and I'm not sure if he's able to receive from other players just when he's in those pockets as well. And as such, that's where I'd really want him to be receiving to hurt Manchester United. So whilst I'm still expecting us to win, I'm just not sure by how much we are going to win, how many goals we're going to score, and how many chances he accumulates. And as such, I'm okay with just owning him and not captaining him when Bryan Mbeumo exists with a certain ceiling as well. Definitely not an easy game for him, right? But I think it's a good enough one where I can justifiably say that he's the best option on my team. I obviously discussed Watkins' captain in greater depth yesterday. And talking about Ollie Watkins, I've decided I'm bringing him in, which I yesterday, but I've decided I'm selling Matthias Cunha for him. It's more so the off-the-field variables. If it was just like Palace away after the FA Cup, Brentford at home on the final day, say goodbye to the fans, wonderful. But given that he could be rotated, that's other players who need to get minutes, similar to like the Trent Bradley situation with an eye on next season, and the fact that like his behaviour's been a bit I just feel like it's too much of a risk for me to take on in the form of selling Alexander Isak. So he'll be staying. And what I'll be doing is I'll be benching Saar. I'm just going to bench both of my Crystal Palace assets, given that they've got the FA Cup final. And I will be starting Alexander Isak with my double Arsenal defence. Now, that is something that I usually wouldn't do. It also seems somewhat counterintuitive to someone who's trying to maximise their ceiling. But for me, I genuinely think Arsenal could keep a clean sheet. Not necessarily that they will, but they could keep a clean sheet. But at the same time, Isak's so good. He's just an elite footballer. And I know in just a moment he can produce it. And I wouldn't want him on the bench. And with that type of floor, I don't feel overly comfortable benching for the likes of Saar when you're in this particular game week following the FA Cup. So I will be starting all of them. And I'm sure I'll get a decent result out of it regardless. So that's my team this week. It'll be 3-4-3. Cunha's getting sold for Watkins. And Bryan Mbeumo will have the captaincy. The most popular section this week, even more so than the expected minutes and prospects of Crystal Palace assets. That is the forwards. Ange Postecoglou has come out and said that he's going to rest players and he's going to field a weakened side in preparation for the Europa League final, given that he's got one eye on it. It's interesting because Ruben Amorim actually said that he probably wasn't going to do that and his starting 11 would get like a decent amount of minutes in this game, assuming that there was very, very, very little risk associated to them starting and them getting injured. But going back to the point, it means that Watkins probably just becomes an even better asset than we had him down initially because we have confirmation of some form of the starting lineup. So for me, best transfer in this week. Cunha, my thoughts were expressed on the last slide. I'd be happy to part ways. Equally with Mateta, as I discussed in EYN. In particular, I personally just don't think like his expected minutes are great this week. Obviously, a trip to Anfield on the last day, the FA Cup final. The fact that he's not on penalties, the fact he's not in great form. I think he's an easy sell. Marmoush, for me, it would be a very challenging sell because as I've maybe discussed with Cunha earlier in the season, and this is slightly different, but he is just very good at football. And I think it's very difficult to justify selling him just for that simple fact, right? All he needs is a moment, which is interesting because he actually has quite a few routes to points. Not as many as the likes of Brian Mbeumo, Mohamed Salah, even Cole Palmer, but he's got enough, right? Like functioning as that second striker, running beyond Haaland, leveraging his ball striking from like situations where there's a settled block and City are just moving the ball sideways, in particular to try and create a gap. If he just wanted to unleash one, I think he could certainly score from there. He's got some set pieces as well. So I think overall, he's a very difficult sell ahead of 2 must-win games for Manchester City, especially when Haaland's back. And I think when he functions off the left, in tangent with Haaland, that's actually his best position as a left player. And we've seen how City have been using the forwards in those inside areas as opposed to like really holding the width. That's more the fullback's job. And if you give him an overlapping like Nico Riley, Guardiola, Haaland to play off, I think he could do really well. Or at least well. So I personally would be hesitant to sell Marmoush, and I'd really try and find another way. And then the last one is, look, if it has to be Marmoush, then yeah, obviously you can toss it up. I just think in many cases, it doesn't have to be Marmoush. There is another potential solution. That is something I'd consider. In terms of Isak, I'd say it's far more subjective than the rest. If you do bring him in, are you going to captain him? What's your overall level of conviction? And what if the fixtures were the other way around? Now, this isn't an exact science. So you can't just say, oh, if they were the other way around, it'd be the same thing. Because, for example, you probably wouldn't sell Watkins, probably wouldn't sell Isak this week. You take Watkins, and then you'd get, probably wouldn't sell Isak this week, and then you take Watkins in 38 when he has Spurs, and Isak has Arsenal away, right? So you get one of each. Whereas in this scenario, it's very much a case of like 2 or 2. Like you could get Isak for both or Watkins for both. But the reason I brought it up is how much weight do you put on that Everton at home fixture? Like how good do you think it is in comparison to Man United away? Because that's really what many people are battling here, right? Okay, yeah, fine. Like in cases for myself and others who are selling Mateta, yeah, we don't have to worry about this. But if you are in the camp where your only realistic route is Alexander Isak, how do you see that fixture going for him in 38 and Watkins is in 38? Because that's really what you're going to have to weigh up as well, because it's not just a 1-game example, it's a 2-game example. And it's easy to, maybe buy into the hype and go now. But if you really think Isak's better in 38, and by a considerable distance, I wouldn't sell, because you also get to keep a transfer on the assumption you like another captain as well for this week. And you're not just fixated on captaining Ollie Watkins. So I'd say that's more subjective. I don't really want to say oh, sell him or oh, don't sell him. I think if it was me, if I absolutely had to choose, I'd probably just bite the bullet and say no, which I don't think would be completely popular, but I just don't feel comfortable selling Isak. I'd probably just bite the bullet and say no, but it's extremely close, and I don't think anyone can criticize you for going for the move necessarily. So benching dilemmas, the staple piece of solving your problems, which hasn't seen as much attention lately in this video, or at least hasn't been in the limelight as much, but we're back with it. I wouldn't bench Marmoush in any case. Similar for reasons I discussed on the last side. I just think he's too good. Stylistically against Bournemouth, pretty decent matchup as well. I mean, if he can exploit that high line, I think, especially with those runs of Haaland where he occupies the centre-backs, I think you're in business. I'd be more inclined to bench De Bruyne out of 2, and I'm personally not as high on him as other people. I think if you actually look at the performances, forget the point, you look at the performances, outside of a good 60-minute spell against Crystal Palace, he really hasn't had much. Yeah, I know he got an 11-pointer against Wolves, one man of the match, but I didn't personally think it was a particularly brilliant performance. You go and watch it back. How much did he really create? How influential really was he? Wasn't that influential? Against Villa, didn't have much. Against Everton, didn't have much. Against Southampton, okay, yeah, a bit, but with all due respect, it is Southampton. But I don't think you need to start De Bruyne, and I don't think he carries the same threat as maybe is perceived. Opinion. So if you did want to bench him, I don't personally think there's anything wrong with it. But I assume in most teams, given the makeup of them, one Palace attacker, he starts. More so for the really strong ones, because I did see one that was incredibly strong, and I was yeah, I'd bench De Bruyne here. Especially if you're going to start Marmoush as well, right? Do you really want to carry double City attack as that type of risk? If it was Marmoush Haaland, then yeah, fair enough. But De Bruyne X, not so sure. You could bench Isak, absolutely right. I mean, they're going away to the Emirates. It's the toughest place to go, probably 2 score goals. But irrespective of your stance on him, I think you have to have some acknowledgement that he is just elite. And he almost defies fixtures to an extent, right? Because it doesn't really... Obviously, it matters to an extent. But he can overcome the barriers that other can't, right? Similar to Salah. You put him in a big 6 game, 4:30, Super Sunday, you know you're getting the goods more times than not, right? And I think somewhat similar with Isak. Against most people, he's probably just going to get the better of you. Look what he's done to Saliba and Gabriel already this season, right? And Gabriel's not even going to be there on the pitch, at least. So with that, and with the fact that there's a lot just going Newcastle's way, a lot of momentum, good form that they're riding, and it's a must-win game for both sides, I think that like the floor is still certainly there, even with that, even with him just being a little bit off it due to his injury, barely off it. And it would be a sizable risk, therefore, to bench. So even with me, like I'm starting double Arsenal defense because of how good he is. I'm okay starting him with that, right? Because I just think he's that good. And if you look at his floor and then you compare it to your 7th attacker ceiling, is it really worth it? If your 7th attack has a really good ceiling and a good floor this week, then by all means. But that's just probably unlikely. And so in most cases, I'd be starting Alexander Isak. AVL Assets, I mean, we've gone over this so many times. I think it's somewhere in the middle, right? Like, they've got that FA Cup. If they win, honestly, I think it's worse for them in terms of FPL because I think they'll all just be partying. Whereas if they lose, they'll probably want to go back, give the fans a bit of a send-off. There'll be a bit of extra motivation, a bit of extra like pain to leverage. If they win, everyone's going to be in a party atmosphere. Whereas Wolves, I feel like, would be a bit more focused. So I actually think if you start them, you probably want them to lose that final, personally speaking. So I'd say they're somewhere in the middle, Mateta aside, because, well, I've spoken about it many times in this video. If you start, I don't think it's particularly bad. If you bench, I don't think it's particularly bad. My preference is to bench. I'm just not so high on them, but like they did all overly surprising. Maybe a little. Villa defender start for me. I mean, one of the better fixtures this game week, considering Spurs are certainly going to rotate, and like I just imagine they won't ever get into 5th gear. I've personally got Forest probably scoring. I don't say that with like an overwhelming amount of confidence. Overwhelmingly confident that we'll see one Premier League game this weekend, but not so much that Forest score. I think they will, but I think I'm not like... So in terms of Areola and Wan-Bissaka, probably bench, but like if you've got a good feeling about it, by all means, it is your own team after all. I'm personally comfortable enough starting Arsenal defense. I mean, Chilwell's got a goal in him, right? He really does. And Arsenal, one of the better set-piece taking teams in the league. I mean, you've got Saka from one side, Rice on the other. They've got a lot of good routines. They're just very well drilled in that sense. So you've always got that chance. Difficult to score set pieces against Newcastle, naturally, but it's there. And they're also just the best defense in the league at home. And I'm personally happy to take that on. But if you're not, then I think that's fair as well, given their opposition. Guardiola starts for me in most cases. Do I love it? No. I mean, Bournemouth aren't particularly easy to keep a clean sheet against. Do I think they'll keep a clean sheet? I'm not that confident, really, to be honest. But I think with the attacking threat, whether it be from fullback or set pieces in particular, and the fact that City have been defending rather well at the moment, I think it's similar to that, of an unnecessary risk to take, given the other options on offer. And when I say Crystal Palace assets, like my preference to bench them, that includes Munoz, personally speaking. He really is getting quite a bit of attention this week. The talk of the town, Ollie Watkins. Should you take a hit for him? And if you have 3 Aston Villa assets, should you be relinquishing one of them to get Watkins? And in most cases, probably for a hit as well. So let's break this down. I think, firstly, we need to establish that the real attractive nature of Ollie Watkins in this set of 2 game weeks is not just the ceiling, right? But more so the floor and the security associated with that. Through the fixtures, through the time he's playing both the teams, through his own quality and through Aston Villa's quality, you've just got a very, very, very healthy 4. So it's probably unlikely to go too badly. So it's very much a case of where on the number line he finishes between alright and this was the best decision of my life. If it's closer to alright, then outcome-wise, relinquishing one of your other Aston Villa assets and potentially doing so with a hit in mind, well, that's probably not going to win you anything. On the opposite side, if it's the best decision of your life because he scores like 2 hat-tricks, then yeah, it probably was worth the hit, especially if you're going to captain him. So I think you have to very much assess where your level of conviction is at. And if it's closer to the alright side, and you think that the effective replacement, whether it be through a transfer or upgrading someone from the bench, hypothetically speaking, does well, then yeah, just don't get him for a hit because 4 points is a whole goal in itself, right? But if you do think it's closer to the best decision of my life, if you are probably going to captain him, then by all means, I think you can relinquish one of the defenders or even Rodgers and then go here. Especially if one of the players you're going to relinquish, you think there's a suitable replacement for them. Like in terms of, let's just say you relinquish Rodgers and you really like Enzo Fernandez, right? Then all of a sudden, you're getting 2 for the price of 1. And in that case, I think it makes a lot more sense. But if not, then just don't, right? And I think this situation applies very much to both, whether you have 3 Aston Villa assets and need to get rid of one of them, but also if you just have 2, but you can't afford Mateta to Watkins, you're not willing to sell anyone else, and you need to downgrade a mid. I think it's very much a similar case. It's where on the lumber line you put yourself between, all right, not bad, good and great, but more so like just good and great, or like decent and great, we should say. That's my breakdown of that. In terms of myself, what I would do, I'm okay taking a hit maybe for one, like to relinquish one of the Villa assets, just because I do genuinely think there's a lot of security associated with him. I don't really fancy taking the risk on. And similar in terms of like selling Moteta and one of the mids as well. Albeit, I still think I'm not selling Isak for him. Finally, a look at Game Week 38, just in case it helps with some of your planning, and one potential differential for this week, which is the man you can see on screen above me, and that is Noni Madueke. I think he's an interesting shout. Now, look, I'm not going here for myself, and I actually pondered it last night, and I thought about it in some depth. I wouldn't, but like I think it's a good enough, or it's an interesting enough prospect for me to suggest it to you to think about. Not necessarily go and buy him, but just to think about, right? Because if he is to play right wing and Neto is to play at 9, which is what I think personally is going to happen, and like I wouldn't be surprised if he does well. But similarly, I'm not sure that we like batter United or like beat them in the same way that people think we do. I guess those are counteracting variables, but I thought it was an interesting enough suggestion for you to consider, and that's only why I brought it up. But I probably wouldn't, right? And I'm certainly not. In terms of 38, I really like Martinelli. If he starts at 9, and I've always liked him at 9, if he starts at 9 away at Southampton, I think you could do some serious damage. Almost like how the Palace mids did in the last game week of last season for Eze with that 18-point haul. I think you could do something similar. So something to consider when it comes to, I don't know, saving a transfer or saving some funds to get him. Bournemouth assets in 38, but in particular Evan Nilsson, like I really like what I see from him at the moment, and I just think he could do really well in that fixture. Whereas with like people like Clive and Semenyo, I don't trust much to return it in this particular game in a one-off as I do Evan Nilsson. And then I think Brighton could score a few in 38, so João Pedro's back. Maybe you go Welbeck. It's hard to get a forward transfer in 38, just given the structure of our squads and our strength in those areas. But I thought it was just something to consider should you like really like one of those options and then want to plan around it this game week. And that is all she wrote for this game week, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the content. I'm looking forward to the game week, and I shall, of course, see you on the other side for transfer plans. It's the final transfer plans on the season on Sunday. Crazy to say. Honestly, it feels like a lifetime ago that we started, and now we're here, only, 10 months later. In terms of the team on the screen, Sarr drops to the first bench. Cunha says bye-bye to the team, and Alexander Isak starts in a 3-4-3. The captaincy is also switched from Brian Mbeumo from Cole Palmer to Brian Mbeumo, as discussed in the first section of the slide. I wish you all the very best of luck. I shall see you on Sunday. Have a wonderful weekend in the meantime. Goodbye.